Once again, this is the fourth program of this 8-part webinar series, Equity in the Energy Marketplace. My name is Kathy Magruder. I'm the Executive Director for MCEC. It's my pleasure to be one of your hosts today. We'd like to recognize our series sponsors for their support and partnership to produce these sessions, which cover a range of key topics for the current advanced energy landscape. Our voltage sponsor includes Constellation, an Exelon company who provides expertise and resources for a customized strategy into your unique business needs. We also want to recognize the Nuclear Power's Maryland Group, which is a new sponsor this year. And one of our partnering sponsors in the past, Siemens, which is a large energy company that has headquarters based in Beltsville. Thank you, Siemens. We'd like to give special thanks to Cone Resnick for supporting the entire 2021 Connecting to the Energy Economy series as our power sponsor. We have a number of special guest panelists today, and there's some really knowledgeable players. For full bios of all of our speakers, you can look online at www.mdcleanenergy.org/speaker series. The title of today's session and the description is that consumers are finding they have to become experts about how to best manage their energy purchase and consumption. Publicly funded initiatives and regulations are needed to ensure that underserved customers benefit from advancements in the energy economy. This session will cover consumer choice from residential energy supply, generation and storage to smart homes, appliances, and adoption of electric vehicles. And we are so honored to have this morning as our moderator, the CEO of the Climate Access Fund and a good friend, Lynn Heller. The Climate Access Fund is a not-for-profit green bank focused on expanding clean energy access to low-wealth communities. Lynn is the former vice president of the ABLE Foundation, where she oversaw operations and managed the foundation's environmental grants portfolio. Lynn is currently the chairman of the board of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, is a former member of the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, and was a founding member of the Baltimore Sustainability Commission. And I know Lynn likes to spend her weekend time down in Southern Maryland on the shores of the Potomac. Lynn, thanks for agreeing to be our moderator today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kathy, for the opportunity to really dive into an issue that is so critically important to all of us, really. Before I introduce our wonderful panelists today, I wanted to just offer a few remarks. We are, to kind of frame the discussion, we are all feeling a sense of urgency to rapidly scale up Maryland's renewable energy generation, but we also recognize the need to ensure that lower wealth households and communities also benefit from the clean energy transition, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because they represent a sizable consumer segment that both emits greenhouse gas emissions and pays for electricity. The good news about where we are is that the interests of actors in our clean energy ecosystem in Maryland are increasingly aligned. Most legislators, regulators, developers, and investors recognize that we need more renewable energy and that it needs to be equitable. The challenge is that the market isn't yet where it needs to be. As Kathy mentioned, I run a nonprofit green bank that fills financing gaps in the development of community solar projects that serve low and moderate income Marylanders. Community solar development, where households can sign up for solar power that is not generated on their rooftops, has the potential to benefit tens, if not hundreds of thousands of lower income households in Maryland, saving them as much as 25% on their electricity bills. But to date, most community solar projects are serving market rate customers, and most are located on large tracts of land in the suburbs and rural parts of the state. This is because Maryland's solar market economics continue to favor larger ground-based projects that serve households with high FICO scores. It simply costs more to develop smaller projects in underserved communities that serve lower income households. Yet these projects could provide not only discounted electricity, but they can create jobs and offer opportunities for wealth creation through shared ownership of the solar systems themselves. My own view is that if we're serious about equitable access to clean energy on a large scale, we need to recognize the financing gaps that are preventing this kind of smaller scale distributed clean energy generation, and we need laws that address and remove these financing gaps. I'm excited about our panel discussion today. As you know, we're going to talk not only about community solar and other forms of clean energy access to low-income communities, but we're going to talk about storage. We're going to talk about smart homes, appliances, the adoption of electric vehicles, energy efficiency, and with a sort of an eye and a focus on equitable access to all of these pieces of the clean energy marketplace. We're excited to have today just a wonderful group of panelists, and I'd like to introduce them now. Just briefly, as Kathy said, full bios are available on the site and in your materials. I will start by introducing, just by title, Dr. Arjun Makhijani. He is the president of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research. Will Ellis, who is the regional VP of Governmental and External Affairs with PepCo. Katie Schiltz, manager, and I hope I said that right, Katie, manager product development. Oops, the chat just covered up your title. Project development at Constellation Energy, project development and management, there you go, at Constellation. And Jacob Auslander, assistant People's Counsel at the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. So thank you all so much for being here today. What we thought we would do collectively is to just really dive right in by asking a question that is central to this webinar. And that is, what does equity in the clean energy marketplace mean to you? We're gonna ask you all, before we launch into the responses by the panelists, we wanted to ask you for your own views about what equity means. Please select your top 3 priorities. There are a number of options here, and we will provide the feedback shortly. Okay. Another minute or two. It can be hard to pick just 3 because these are all good answers. Here we go. Oh, interesting. Okay, so ensuring access to benefits for historically vulnerable communities won. That with 81%, that was a pretty resounding response, followed by environmental justice and pollution impacts, and then financial assistance for low-income customers. Well, thank you. That is a great way to frame the discussion, panelists. And what I will do is turn to each of you and ask you to just share your answer to this really pretty central question. Why don't we start with Dr. Makhijani? Instead of being formal, I'm just going to call you all by your first names. Arjun, will you start? You have studied the economics and the potential outcomes of targeting investments and incentives to more equitably serve consumers in Maryland. We're curious what the studies are telling us and what strategies you think we might need to deploy to get results more quickly.
Yes. Thank you very much, Lynn. So glad to be part of this panel. And I always love to be part of MCEC events. Let me start with a specific example of a pilot project that was done in Maryland, Baltimore, some years back, which I've written about and studied. I was done with the Recovery Act funds about a decade ago or thereabouts. And it was a mix of low-income renters and and um, and homeowners, and it was efficiency retrofits. So the good news is that where the retrofits were successful, they actually reduced bills. They reduced energy burdens. And one of the reasons for investing in low income efficiency and also community solar at affordable prices is that it systemically reduces energy burdens. And as everybody on this panel knows, it's very important to have affordable energy burdens because it results otherwise in homelessness and shutoffs and nobody benefits. The difficulties that emerged in this pilot project were that many of the homes did not pass the audit. They did not have suitable roofs. They had molds. They had a lot of they had moisture, so they couldn't actually implement the efficiency measures. So those who got it really benefited, but many could not get it. For renters, they were going to have the proportion of renters and homeowners, low-income homeowners, that's typical of Baltimore, 70% renters, 30% homeowners. That's the lower income segment and distribution. But almost half of the landlords did not allow the auditors to enter their property. So those houses automatically dropped out. So the landlord is currently often a barrier. And so a large part of the issue is how to convert the landlord when they're a barrier into a partner. And that's a very, very critical problem. The other thing I say is, in the larger perspective, I've been doing some math, and Lynn knows this. This math isn't yet for Maryland, it's for another state that I'm working in. And I looked at the lowest income segments and said, okay, if you did community solar and thorough efficiency measures, and you had somebody at the 40% of federal poverty level, and their energy burden was about 1/4, 24% in this particular instance of this particular county. So you start with a 24% energy burden, you go to community solar, and you have, with 20% discount, now you have a 15% energy burden. And by the time you have done efficiency measures thoroughly, you can actually reduce energy burden to less than half of what was to start with. So that means that a small amount of assistance now can bring even very low income people, 40% of federal poverty level, which is truly low income, to an affordable level. Let me just close these initial remarks by saying what the general benefits are. So the benefits for the low-income households themselves are very obvious of these investments, efficiency and community solar. And I would also say going forward, ability to participate in the smart grid and demand response. But there are also benefits for all ratepayers. When some ratepayers don't pay their bills, other ratepayers have to pick up. The problem for utilities. When there's homelessness that results, and it does too painfully often, then there's a increase in public costs. There are more emergency room visits. There are higher Medicaid costs. So there are pretty huge costs to society. And the last thing I'll say is the energy burden going forward in a transition relative to non-low income people would likely increase for low income people unless we take positive investment action and we limit energy burdens to affordable levels by statute. So there are a lot of reasons for that. I can address that during the Q&A, but I think that that suffices for my introductory. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Arjun. You provided a really good concrete example of a project and then broadened it, which was very helpful. Will, I would love to turn to you as a representative of the utility sector and ask you what equity in the clean energy marketplace means to you.
Yes, and good morning, Lynn. First, I want to say thanks to Kathy and the entire Maryland Clean Energy Center staff, as well as their advisory board. I just love these sessions. So thank you so much for putting on these sessions. It's really been informative, and I've just learned something every time that I attend. So appreciate the hard work that each and every one of you all do every day. You know, as it relates to equity, I think for me personally, I view equity as ensuring that the benefits of our clean energy economy, what we'll discuss today, is reaching the communities that have been historically oppressed and marginalized to the point where they have been disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change. And so one person once told me, Will, is that because we have not fulfilled the promise of equality, is the reason why we need equity. And, you know, and equity is that understanding of that we have a need to focus and be deliberate in our actions to addressing the challenges that certain communities have been disproportionately impacted by climate change, that we can reverse those effects and take actions to truly ensure that the benefits of this clean energy economy is, we can say that it's reaching all of our customers. So equity allows us to do that. It allows us to have a lens to ensure that communities, just as the poll stated, that our most vulnerable customers that can truly benefit and have a means of really truly achieving clean energy within the communities that we serve.
Terrific. Thank you, Will. And let me just say, if anyone has any questions from questions of the panelists, please do go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. I will now turn to Katie to ask you, from the Constellation Energy perspective, what equity in the clean energy economy means to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Good morning, everyone. So I'll just start by giving a little bit of context just to make sure everyone's familiar with who Constellation is. So Constellation is a competitive retail energy supplier, so serving customers in states where competition is enabled. So in states like Maryland, where consumers have a right to choose their energy provider based on competitive rates or other aspects of the plan that best meets their needs. So when I think about equity in the clean energy marketplace, I think that really means helping all customers meet their goals, whether that means budget certainty, reduction of energy usage, or peace of mind. So we're really giving customers the power to choose their supplier based on what helps best meet their goals. And a lot of that in the role that I'm in is through helping them gain access to technology through specialized product offerings that actually include the cost of smart home products in the energy plans. So helping them gain that access to this smart home technology when they sign up for energy plans. So given our role as a competitive energy supplier, we're continually looking for ways to add value to our customers through those additional products, services, and insights that we can deliver. So the primary ways that we are looking at delivering equity are through both affordable, customized energy plans and access to technology. So when I think about access to technology, that's doing things like bundling that smart home equipment with the energy plan that will help empower customers and assist with their ability to reduce energy usage. So things like smart thermostats, smart light bulbs, smart plugs. Another way that we're thinking about delivering those affordable customized energy plans are through plans that provide customers with budget certainty and also peace of mind. So through a plan that we have out there, our AC protection plan, that's using the same concept of bundling, but in this case, it's bundling protection for their HVAC into the electricity plan. So protecting customers from those unexpected repair costs to their cooling system. So for customers who are concerned about budget certainty or looking to achieve that peace of mind by not having to deal with unexpected costs, that is an affordable and customized way to help solve that problem for them. And the last thing I'll mention is just about the analytics that we're providing to our customers. So thinking about that as a way to help empower customers through these actionable insights. So in our energy plans, customers are receiving insights that include everything from bill prediction. So letting them know, here's what we're predicting you're going to spend by the end of the month, right? And then giving them some actionable insights, things that they can actually go and do in their homes to then impact that bill at the end of the month. So taking that surprise element out of the equation where they don't get this huge bill at the end of the month and not understand why. So giving them some insight partway through the month as to what that bill is going to be, but then also letting them know, here are some actionable tips, right? Here's what you can adjust your thermostat to. Here's what you should set your water heater temperature to. So giving them those actionable tips so that we really feel like we're playing a role in lowering the customer's bill at the end of the month.
Terrific. I can tell I already like the balance of the speakers that we have here, and everybody's coming from a different perspective, which is really wonderful. Great job, MCEC. Jacob, I would love to ask you now what equity in the clean energy economy means to you as a representative of the People's Council.
Thank you, and good morning, Lynn. OPC has strongly supported equity measures in a number of initiatives, and to us it means allowing low-income households to meaningfully participate in the initiatives that typically are socialized among ratepayers as a whole. So, touching on something that Will mentioned a few minutes ago, there certainly are communities that have been disproportionately impacted, but as with the rate structures that we currently have in place, they are continuously impacted. And so, addressing equity is one way to put it, but another way would be to target efforts to eliminate the inequity that exists in a system where benefits are technically available to a residential ratepayer class as a whole, but realistically, because of the home energy burdens that some segments of that population face, are essentially unattainable. To use the example that Arjun mentioned, a household with a 24% home energy burden would not be able to participate in the EV charging pilot, for example, that's going on, because presumably a household paying that amount of their annual income for just their base energy bills is unlikely to be able to afford any car, much less a brand new electric vehicle. And those customers will be paying for the EV charging program under the rate structures that are in place. So we believe that we really need to identify and target assistance, and we need to make a conscious effort to make sure that inequity is eliminated, and that may include providing additional levels of assistance to low-income households to make that to make equity a real concept here in Maryland.
Terrific. Well, thank you all. I think the inevitable next question is, what does that mean? So we're all talking about the importance of equity in the clean energy economy. Each of you have given some specific examples, but I wonder if I could ask you all sort of one of my favorite questions, which is, if you could wave a magic wand and there was one change that you could make in the system, sort of whether that be a policy change, a regulatory change, a financing change, to achieve the greatest benefit in terms of equal access to the clean energy economy, what would that be? And I can start while you guys are thinking, because I think for me, it is all about the policy, the need for policies that incentivize the private sector to prioritize serving lower income households, or if not prioritize, at least serve low income households in the same way that they serve market rate households. We are not there yet. And we have, some wonderful programs, but rather than using public capital in the form of grant funding, which needs to continue in the short term, but in addition to that, in my view, we should be using public capital to leverage further private capital, because really that's the only way to scale up these solutions. It's the private sector that installs renewable energy projects. It's the private sector that goes into folks' homes and makes the energy efficiency improvements. So in order to really scale up these solutions, we can't simply be throwing grant money at the problems. We need to be leveraging private dollars. So my one example would be within the community solar realm, because I view that as very, very scalable and effectively keeping money in the pockets of lower income households. I would say we need to create financing incentives, and we won't go into detail about what those might be, to encourage developers to work in underserved communities to build solar projects that benefit these households. So I am going to turn, let's see, Katie, you get to go first with that answer.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, so if I'm thinking about, that one single action that would really help make a difference, I think, again, kind of from my perspective where I sit, the energy space overall, I think is complex and can be overwhelming to the consumer to navigate through the available options and understanding, what out there is going to best help solve their needs, right? And then you throw some of these, smart home products on top of that, and it becomes even more complex. And so I think for me, so much of achieving equity really comes down to the focus on education, and just the role that companies can play to help explain what are the benefits of some of these new smart home technologies. And it doesn't have to be something large and expensive, right? Like the smart appliances, the smart refrigerator, the smart washer and dryer, right? There are very simple, easy to install, inexpensive products out there. Something as simple as a smart plug, right, that can be used to make an older appliance smarter, that can help with that energy reduction, can help them reach those energy goals and lower the monthly energy burden. But I think for consumers to know that those are options and that those products exist, so much of it comes back to education and what can we do to kind of dispel maybe the perception that's out there that this is out of reach for them, this is inaccessible, this is going to cost me a lot of money, right? That's not necessarily the case with something simple like a smart plug. And so what can be done to further educate consumers and really make those products readily available to them to then positively impact their usage.
Terrific, thanks. Will, you're next. What's your magic wand?
Wow. I think that's a really tough question, and I like Katie's answer. I tell you, I think education is the way I would go too, but just a little different spin that um, that we are in a pandemic, right? We talk a lot about the COVID-19 pandemic, but I in a sense, equity is also the pandemic that we're trying to tackle, and probably one of the greatest challenges of our generation. So ensuring that there is a belief that there are communities and people that are going through systematic injustices every day that is preventing them from reaching the true benefits of this clean energy transformation is something that I would want to ensure that everyone has. So it kind of starts with education, but it's the realization that there are systematic inequities that Jacob was speaking to that is disproportionately impacting a number of communities in ways that is preventing them from achieving a lot of the goals that we all have in mind that Arjan spoken to related to energy efficiency, electric vehicles, you name it. And so, and for me, within the utility space in our programs, I used to oversee our energy efficiency programs, and I used to tell everyone we have programs that all customers can participate in. And until recently, I didn't understand the problem with that statement. That true, we have programs that all customers can participate in, but if every customer can participate in a certain program, you're not addressing equity. That's equality. So we have to be comfortable with, we need to be deliberate in creating specific programs that are looking at inequities for certain populations and communities that we serve to address their barriers for participation. So it's looking deep, you have to dive deeper than just equality. So if everyone can participate in any program that you have, you have to really think about, is that addressing equity? And so for our energy efficiency programs, our Empower Maryland programs, we have lighting rebates and appliance rebates, and we typically partner with the big box retailers because they were everywhere, right? The Lowe's, the Home Depots, the Best Buys, the big box places. They were again, they served a lot of customers. But what we come to learn is that for certain communities, that was not where they were shopping at, or they were not located in all communities. And so we started to have to, put our rebates in places like the Dollar Tree or Renter Center, or even smaller mom and pop retailers, so that we can actually, really reach the communities that we were missing. And so, you have to make a conscious effort to look at who are your partners, what are the communities that they serve in, and how can you create a more inclusive approach to offering these programs so that they can actually reach the communities that need our help the most.
Really, really helpful, Will. And I'm going to turn to Jacob next so that you're not last again.
All right, thank you. Well, if it was a magic wand, and I guess this is maybe running a little counter to what you just mentioned, Lynn, but I guess if it was a magic wand, I guess not having money be an object and having enough funds to do everything that we would like to see would be what I would most like to see happen. But using maybe the metaphor a little bit more realistically, one of the things that we have endeavored to see is a higher quality of data collection by utilities, the establishment of metrics, so that the size of the problem can be assessed, and that the resources that we do have available to us can be directed and allow us to have the best bang for our buck. We're currently trying to achieve those enhanced metrics in the Empower program, which is a program that has been around for quite some time in Maryland. But one that we continue to see is disproportionately used by households that are above the 250% federal poverty level, and that we believe will require a conscious, targeted effort to enhance participation by low-income households if equity is really going to be achieved.
Terrific. Arjun.
Well, thank you, Lynn.
And thank you for qualifying the magic wand question, Jacob. You're right. It's not true. I don't really mean magic wand. I mean just below magic wand. Arjun.
Okay, yeah. So I'll restrain myself. The PSC and Office of People's Counsel considered this in Maryland in 2012. It's being done in several states. I think as we get to the place where we're serious about an energy transition, which I think we are for the first time throughout the United States, I think we need to limit energy burdens of low-income households to 6%. That is absolutely essential because this year we've seen many kinds of climate catastrophe in the United States and around the world. Bills are going to go up. Utilities in California, for instance, they need to make investments to fireproof their system. Somebody's going to have to pay for that. It's going to be ratepayers. It's getting hotter. Air conditioning bills will go up. We've seen that too. Also, the equitable participation. Thank you for making that distinction between equity and equality. Well, I truly appreciated that. It's very, very critical. And so I would say that if I had sort of just below a magic wand, what is feasible, demonstrated to be feasible, is finding the funds to limit energy burdens to 6%. And I'd add an education component to it, but not for low-income people. I would add an education component for everybody to make them understand how much it benefits the whole society when low-income people aren't becoming homeless because, and I'll give you two short examples. I did a calculation, many of you know, my institute did an energy equity report for Maryland in 2015, 6 years ago. And I calculated that when there's one homelessness event, and people truly don't go to friends or family, but become homeless, the costs of shelter and added emergency room visits in our region per homelessness event is about $28,000, big plus or minus. That's just one, that doesn't exhaust the costs. And that's the cost to the non-low income people. The low income people, of course, suffer the most. Then 3 out of 4 of those who become homeless wind up with friends and family. And we don't know what the costs to them and society are for that. Disrupted school, disrupted jobs, disrupted transportation. So I really would, first of all, we don't have good data in our state to show what the costs of unaffordable energy truly are for society and for low-income households themselves. I'd like that data, and I'd like everybody else to be educated of how much it benefits them if we have an affordable and equitable energy system. And that gives an incentive to the whole of society to invest in the energy transition, community solar for everybody, low-income people, because it reduces the amount of money you need for, providing the assistance to make energy affordable. That's why I gave that example. You can start with the 25% burden, and if you have community solar and efficiencies, you have a pretty big investment in reducing energy burden, 6%. But then if you have the community solar and if you have the efficiency investments, you dramatically reduce the amount of public money you need to make energy affordable. So the energy transition can make energy affordable for everybody, but we need to make it a positive part of our program. My magic wand would be start at that 6% affordability.
Terrific. Thank you. We have a couple of good questions in the Q&A. I will start with the first. With the push to go green via many state environmental goals within the next 10 years, how can we protect our most vulnerable populations from bearing the brunt of these types of changes? Do any of you want to address that in particular?
Well, let me just say one sentence. That's what my 6% energy burden, limit energy burdens to 6% was directed at. There's going to be a complicated transition. We're going to need real-time rates, for example. If you don't have an ability to do demand response and real-time rates, your bills are going to be higher. So if you've protected low-income people, it will benefit, it will make the energy transition efficient for everybody and affordable for everybody. That's why I say that's the first thing to do, not the only thing to do.
I think it's a very good question, and I have some time to think about it. I think the first push to that question is there a cost to go green that will disproportionately impact customers? I actually would say it will actually cost our customers more to do nothing than it would to actually go through this transition. So by default, I would say that customers should save money in the long run. When we think about, as John stated, the hospital bills, the missing school time, the infrastructure that will be destroyed from climate change, right? The cost to do nothing is going to impact our customers and our communities way more than the cost to actually tackle this challenge. So I'll start there. But how do we ensure that the cost is not in proportion as well as that? I think is also ensuring that the benefits reaches the communities are proportionate. And so when we talk through, energy efficiency, community solar, when we leverage public and private funds to implement those programs, we have to ensure that the communities are actually participating. I think that goes to Jacob's point in terms of understanding that certain customers or all customers are paying into, say, our energy efficiency programs, but are all customers realizing the benefits that they've been promised to achieve. And so I think that, to me, is the great neutralizer in this conversation, is our ability to ensure that all communities are achieving the benefits of this. And there's just not certain communities. And typically and historically, those certain communities have been the most affluent that have participated. When we look at who's adopting EVs or who doing the deep energy retrofits, is those who have the disposable income. And what we're all here talking today is how do we ensure that all customers can do those things that is going to help drive positive change in their communities.
And I think that's actually a great segue into our next question, which is there an opportunity to get a shift in the approach or view that public money, e.g. grants, leverage private money? The issue for private finance isn't a quantum of money, rather it's a risk issue. That's what drives their investment decision. What will it take for public monies being directed to de-risk investments as first loss money and unlock the private money that is readily available for enhanced risk, for the enhanced risk profile? It's possible the result is a 20-to-1 leverage on public funds. This questioner is speaking my language, because that is exactly what I think we mean by using public grant dollars to leverage private capital. Because in order to de-risk projects, you need guarantee capital. That guarantee capital cannot have a return, so it cannot be a privately funded source of capital. So it needs to come from public dollars. So that's precisely the type of leveraging that we're talking about. I want to use as a specific example, the Maryland Energy Administration has provided my organization actually with a $3 million grant, which is a guarantee fund, which says allows us to say to private solar developers, if you agree to serve this many low-income households, we will cover, for a limited period of time, we will cover any defaults on their payments that those households might make. We have certain criteria, but that way, that incentivizes. The idea behind that grant program is that it levels the playing field for developers of projects such that it's the same risk to them whether they serve low-income households or not, regardless of FICO scores and creditworthiness. So that's a perfect example of the kind of leveraging that we're talking about. By using that public money in the form of a guarantee, it allows us to bring in private development capital to serve these low-income households. Does anyone else want to address that question? Let's move on to sort of a technology question. I'm so focused on solar and community solar and access to community solar in a distributed way that I'm always curious about these other technologies. And Katie, I know you talk a lot about your smart technologies and access and educating folks that they have access to this. And actually, I'm going to shift back to Will for utilities. How do you all see, in terms of access and equity? You mentioned before the question, or maybe it was Jacob that mentioned the question of access to electric vehicles and it not being necessarily very practical. In terms of technologies that we can use to create more equity in the clean energy economy, what technologies should we really be focusing on? Is it solar? Is it, maybe offshore wind that, we manage to make accessible to low-income households? Or is it EVs? Or is it energy efficiency? Or is it smart meters? Can you say a little bit about that, Will?
Yes. Oh man, that's a loaded question because all of those technologies are so fascinating. We could actually talk to each and every one of them. But personally, I say I have an affinity. Of course, I think I have an affinity for energy efficiency because I truly believe the cheapest kilowatt is the one never used. I love solar, love it to death, but I've audited homes that have the poorest insulation and air sealant that has solar, and their solar just going right out the door. So I will always choose energy efficiency first before going to solar or renewable energy, because you should only use the amount of energy that you need in order to cool or heat your home. And that is being efficient. So within that context, so I'm a little biased here, but within that context, for me, the biggest technology the greatest technology that has the potential to benefit customers the most is the smart thermostat. We know that heating and cooling costs is about 60% of your energy bill today. And that smart thermostat has the ability to really just fundamentally, reduce those costs by 20%. I tell friends all the time, like, the smart thermostat, being able to control it while you're away, for it to be able to use geofencing technology to know whether you or someone are home or not home, to pre-cool your house, right, to making sure that's comfortable when you're getting home. All these great things that a smart thermostat has. And I tell you, I still have friends today. I was asking them, did a poll study at my last football game, where you keep your thermostat on? And a lot of people said that thermostat was on 68 degrees in the summertime. And I was like, it was just blew my mind. Like, my thermostat in the summertime, I keep my thermostat on 77 degrees because I know each degree, costs you about $5 to $10 a month. And you're just leveraging that energy. So to me, I'll stop there because I know other folks have thoughts on other technology and I want to hear Katie's thoughts, but the smart thermostat has a great opportunity to save so many customers so much money. And that's a program that we're really focused on, is getting that smart thermostat into each of our customers' homes.
Katie?
Yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, so, loved your comment, Will, about the cheapest kilowatt is the one never used. Couldn't agree more. But yeah, I mean, absolutely agree. As far as giving customers the biggest bang for their buck in terms of what can they, from a technology standpoint, what can they put in their home to see that greatest reduction in their monthly bill, it's absolutely the smart thermostat. That's from positioning ourselves as an expert in the energy management space, right? That is a product that we really emphasize with our customers. We have, energy plans where we're actually giving smart thermostats away to our customers, but not just giving them the thermostat. Then there's really a focus on how do you use it, right? We don't want you having it at 77 degrees in the summertime, right? We're giving them, here's recommended schedules, and here's the associated savings that you can expect to see when you use these recommended temperature settings, right? So lots of people have smart thermostats, but they're not programming them, they're not using the scheduling feature of them. And so they're, going back to education, right? There is that educational component to them. How can we, we'll help you set a schedule that's going to achieve that, 15-20% monthly savings on your bill. So giving them those recommendations, beyond smart thermostats, right? There are other devices where you will see smaller, more incremental impacts on the energy bill. So things like smart lighting, or using a power strip, or a smart plug to control appliances that don't need to be left on, right? So having using the scheduling feature again to have devices in the off position so that they're not consuming energy, right? You don't have that phantom load when the customer is not home. So looking at things like that as well, but I agree, Will, that the smart thermostat is absolutely going to help customers see the biggest impact on their bill.
Great, thanks. And we have a question in the Q&A about geothermal in rural areas, especially if you don't want to use agricultural land for solar. Oh, I apologize, I was muted. Have you done research on geothermal? Do you have any perspective on that with respect to equity? Arjun?
I have, yeah. I mean, I've looked at it. I think geothermal is not necessarily only for rural areas. Of course, somewhat easier in rural areas because, you need a well. I'm presuming you're talking about geothermal heating systems that are different than geothermal power plants. So geothermal heating systems need a well or a shallow loop. So you have to have a certain amount of surface area to do that, or enable a drilling rig to access your property. So can't be done everywhere, but you'd be surprised what a creative geothermal engineer can do, even in a dense city like Buffalo, New York. I've seen that. It's brilliant. Geothermal, of course, is the best technology in terms of efficiency for heating and cooling. By my back of the envelope, if you compare geothermal cooling in Maryland in the summer, you're reducing your cooling bills by your cooling electricity use by about 75 to 80%. That it's actually extremely dramatic. So that's reducing. So you only use about 20-25% of the electricity you're using, and you're really shaving the peak by a couple of kilowatts per house. But it can be done in urban areas. The issue is cost and the cost of the well. Today, and this is actually a problem I like to put on the table, which is that the heat pump itself costs more than a regular heat pump. And that has always puzzled me. So I've talked to people in the industry about it as to why. Because in theory, it should be cheaper. Because you don't have an outside component, you don't have to, weatherproof your condenser, all that. It should be cheaper. It's the nature of the market right now. And so I think one of the things to do is to, go in a direction where geothermal heat pumps become cheaper, and the well drilling technology would also become cheaper and more accessible to more types of residences, but very good for rural areas. It's well supported by the state of Maryland and the federal government in terms of, so in the terms of the current tax credits and rebates, it's quite affordable. If your heating system is broken and you want a new one, look at geothermal, I would say. Yeah, and easier in rural areas if you have an installer that's accessible. That I think is an issue, is, there are not a lot of installers that are very well experienced and qualified. There are some in Maryland, and that's something that maybe we ought to look at public policy for. How do you increase the supply of well-qualified geothermal?
Terrific. Jacob, I wonder if you could start, you mentioned sort of the fact that, a lower income household might not be able to afford an EV. And I think you also mentioned the need for education, as did Will and Katie. What kind of best practices are there out there? And, if you want to have one of the other panelists answer the question, that's completely fine. But in terms of educating consumers, sort of what are some of the ideas and kind of methodologies or ways to do that?
Well, we have, as an office, made an effort to create fact sheets on certain areas and make them available on our website. But we're also, being realistic. We realize that many residential ratepayers don't know our office exists, and so would not go to our webpage to access that information. I think that efforts by other entities that have a more direct presence in the communities is probably going to be the best avenue to disseminate information about programs that are available. I will say that it's going to be hard work. There's no easy fix. I think that there's a tendency for folks in the utility regulatory world to accomplish things through tariff changes and things like that apply to classes of customers, and then that's it, right? And I think that what we are talking about here, as far as achieving equity in a new clean energy economy, will require hard work and targeted outreach, probably through trusted messengers in the communities that most need that sort of assistance.
Katie and Will, you both mentioned the importance of education. Do you have any additional thoughts?
Yes, really quickly, I think EV is one of those fascinating topics as it relates to equity, because there's a ton of lenses that you can look at from an equity standpoint. And, I would encourage everyone, the lens that we look at equity through the most is financial. Right? Are we reducing the barriers for customers to be able to afford to take a part of this transition in terms of purchasing EV, et cetera? But there are other barriers that prevent customers to participate. Like, I live in Prince George's County, one of the most affluent African-American counties in the country, and financial, with a median income of around 90,000. So financial barriers is not the only reason why Blacks or Latinos are not purchasing EVs at the rates of whites and other non-minorities. There are some other systematic barriers that may exist, and it could start with charging, right? Are there enough charging facilities located geographically in diverse communities to make folks want to buy that purchase? And that's one of the programs that we're doing that Jacob alluded to, our EV public charging program, where the commission allowed utilities to install about 1,000 public chargers throughout Maryland as a whole, to tackle that issue that if regardless of income, if you don't see a charger, are you likely to charge your facility? Especially if you live in a multifamily or condominium that doesn't have a garage, can you find a place to charge, even if you wanted to buy an EV? So we've been trying to tackle that, and I will take the time to applaud communities, we went to every single leader in Prince George's and Montgomery County and municipalities like Mount Rainier, New Carrollton, Greenbelt, and a number of others. They understood that even though there may be not a plethora of EV drivers in my community today, that in the future there will be, and we need to ensure that we take advantage of programs today so that we're not left behind, because that happens historically, is that there are certain communities that are left behind in the transformation, and I think our EV public charging program has been sought out to address those inequities. But also when we have the lens towards financial, we look at we can look at it from a lens of like Uber drivers, who spend a lot of their income, who are predominantly low to moderate income customers who actually drive Ubers, but they spend majority of their income on transportation. So how do we fix that with the lens of clean energy? And so are there rate structures that we can tailor to low to moderate income customers who have an EV to encourage them to buy EV? How can we partner with the used EV market? Because I mean, EVs is going on about a decade now. You can find like a 2006 Tesla for really affordable prices, right? So I think there's opportunities, but you just have to be deliberate in your approach to ensure that communities understand that when you're going out to buy a car, EVs are an option. You have a place to charge them. You have an affordable rate structure that in place that can comprise of this holistic view of how do we make EVs attainable to all.
And how do you as a utility do that in terms of education? I certainly see a lot of information from my own utility, but what are some of the things that you have found have worked better than others in terms of educating customers?
I think is no magic bullet. Any marketer will tell you, you have to reach customers in a number of different ways, and it takes a number of different touch points for it to resonate. But I'll tell you that you have to be in touch with the needs of the community. You can't just send them a flyer and think that that's going to get them to take action, right? I think a community-based approach is the one that has that resonates the most. So attending community meetings, right? Meeting them where they're at, making sure that they see themselves in the marketing that you're producing, whether it's through the language that you're using, right? When we talk about how diverse this region as a whole, from first generation immigrants to, English as a second language, we need to ensure that we're understanding those barriers to communication and addressing those in our language, bilingual marketing and flyers and that sort of things, being able to translate our websites, all of that stuff I think helps. But I definitely take the approach that we need to meet the community where they are. We need to go and have a lot of one-on-one conversations, town hall meetings, community advisory groups to really address their barriers that are specific to them. Really quick story, I tell you, like for, at least for my family, I've been trying to get my mother to get rid of her extra refrigerator in the basement for a long time. I'm like, Mom, we'll come and pick it up. We'll give you a rebate. You don't need this extra refrigerator sitting down here. You barely use it, but it's using energy. And so those types of discussions that a lot of demographics have, they're just things that you won't know unless you're really entrenched with those community needs. And that to me is the best way to solve these issues.
Lynn, could I say an unpopular thing?
Yes, sure.
There's a role for public policy in EV equity. I mean, there are a lot of different roles, but one specific thing that I'd like to mention is currently both federal and state policy are, if you buy a new EV, you get a rebate. I think in Maryland it's $3,000. And then on top of the $7,500 federal level. I think mostly we're giving upper income people rebates to buy, go from a Mercedes or BMW to a Tesla. That's typically a lot of what is happening. I think rebates are very important, but if we have equity in mind, we should give rebates, first of all, to those who are doing Lyft and Uber for a living, driving more than 30, 40, 50,000 miles a year, taxis, airport vehicles, airport vans, delivery vehicles, public transit buses, and school buses. So what you're doing is you're having really a great impact for your dollar on climate because you're subsidizing high mileage vehicles. And secondly, you're having a great effect on the communities that have the most pollution from fossil fuel transport. So I think we really need to rethink how we are using the rebate dollars. I would support a great increase in rebate dollars, provided it is equity centered. And in this case, equity centered would have a giant, many times the climate impact of the dollar of giving somebody that's driving 15,000 miles a year, $3,000 to buy an EV. So it may be unpopular, uh, but I think, some things you do for equity might be unpopular, but we'll all benefit. And this could be one thing that we
Great. I'm going to shift gears. We have an interesting question here in the Q&A about resilience. A lot of utilities and grid operators are in the planning stages for grid modernization in the face of more distributed energy resources interconnecting with the grid. This has started multiple discussions on how evaluation is placed on resilience when making grid infrastructure siting decisions. What voices should we include in these discussions to ensure the equity component, particularly for unserved and underserved communities, is included? Does anyone want to tackle the equity component of resilience?
I'll start and I'll let Jacob or others chime in, but I think it starts with the understanding that climate change is real. The storms and severe weather that has been impacting our region is only going to get worse. And we need to ensure that our most vulnerable population of communities and customers has the needs and services to be able to, withstand or shelter in place to these, ever increasingly number of storms. I tell you, this is the second straight year we've run out of names for hurricanes, right? So I think that trend is going to continue. So when we think about how do we ensure resiliency from a utility standpoint, not only electricity, but gas and water and all the other essential services that our customers needs. It starts with ensuring that the communities are at a table to understand the impacts that these storms are having. We're all working from home, it looks like, so we're all home, right? And so we know that the disruption of storms has even a larger impact on our ability to work from home, our kids' ability to go to school. So resilience is just becoming a really important topic. And so, I'll start with just saying that I think it's a topic that the community has to run point on in terms of we know that storms are increasing. So what facilities in the communities that needs to incorporate things like resiliency hubs? How do we create more microgrids so that the essential services of a bank or a grocery store or community center can have that access to power during these events? And I think that's our role in working with communities to ensure that the most critical services have that constant power.
Thank you. Jacob or Katie, do you have anything to add about the resilience component?
I think that Will did a nice job there. I would agree that as far as approaching resiliency through microgrids, I think that the siting of those microgrids in places that would provide a refuge during extended outages is important. And because of the great costs associated with microgrids, I think adding in an equity component and placing those facilities in communities that would be hardest hit by extended outages could be a factor in justifying their construction. We have in the past seen proposals for microgrids that would have required a disproportionate level of ratepayer funding, in our opinion. And we do think that if we're talking about a solution that would involve a microgrid. Because of the cost, we as ratepayer advocates would like to see there be additional funding sources so that the costs were not borne solely by ratepayers. But I do think that making sure that the facilities are located in a place that would benefit folks that would be hardest hit would certainly go a long way to justifying the cost that would need to be incurred.
Katie, does your work at Constellation have, do you work with resilience much?
We
Or grids or?
No, I mean, I think that the topic, right, is something that we talk about, but it's not something that I'm involved with.
Yeah. Another good question in the Q&A, many access and equity programs target residential. Have any programs proven effective in meeting the energy upgrade needs of small and medium-sized commercial property owners and tenants, specifically ones that serve LMI communities? Many such businesses don't participate in utility energy efficiency programs, and due to the small project sizes, often go overlooked by private sector contractors and energy consultants. What role can communities play regarding engagement? Does anyone want to take that?
Sure, I'll start. We have in our Maryland utilities, so not just Pepco and Delmarva Power, but all of our Maryland utilities. So I want to put a plug out for everyone in the Empire Maryland programs. We have a small business program. I'm really proud to say, we have focused on with our small business program opportunity zones. Right, where within the small business community that need our help the most. And so, working with a diverse set of trade allies to ensure that we remove barriers, right? These small businesses, right, we all know for small business, they're the CEO, the CFO, they're putting their kids through school. They have so many other things to worry about. And so to get in the door to talk energy efficiency or to talk solar when they're trying to keep the lights on, when they're trying to make payroll, trying to make ends meet, it's really tough, especially during the pandemic. And so, but I am proud to say our small business program is one of the programs that has been extremely successful. Our rebates typically cover 70 to 80% of the cost of a project upgrade. So it makes it really affordable for small businesses to take advantage of it. And then on top of that, we also have a 0% financing opportunity where customers can have a energy advance put on their Pepco bill or utility bill to finance the portion of the project that the rebate doesn't cover. So it's a really great program, but from an equity perspective, I think the real win that we've started to look at is where do we go? What trade allies do we partner with? So how do we ensure that we have a diverse set of trade allies? So in our program, we have up to about 50 trade allies that are really entrenched in a number of different communities. You name it, the shopping malls throughout Prince George's and Montgomery County, the strip malls. So they are ensuring the barbershops, the hair salons, they're hitting everyone to ensure if they go in, they see a incandescent light bulb or high pressure sodium light bulb, they're trying to convert those to LEDs. And so that's, to me, is how we drive equity, is ensure that we have a diverse contractor pool, and as well as targeting certain communities with our marketing material to ensure that they take advantage of the programs that we have to offer. And it's been really successful so far. So happy to tout one of those great programs. But if you know small business that haven't participated, we're happy to share that information and come out and do all types of webinars and engagement to get those to participate as well. So thanks.
Terrific. Katie, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to just talk a little bit about a program that Constellation has. So I'm, primarily the work that I'm doing is focused on our residential customers, but Constellation also has part of our organization where we're serving commercial and industrial customers. And so one of the programs that we offer, it's something called EME. It's Efficiency Made Easy. And the idea with this program is that there's no upfront cost to customers. So we're actually using the energy rate as a way over the cost of the project to using the energy rate to pay for the efficiency measures that are being made. And then at the end, as a result, right, there is this guaranteed savings. So it's a way to take that barrier down of large upfront capital costs, remove that barrier, right, and spread it out through a small increase in the monthly energy rate, but then at the end have that guaranteed savings that the customer will continue to experience for the remainder of the life of the building.
Terrific, thank you. That sounds like a great product. I want to point everyone to the chat. Arjun Makijani posted some information about a blog post that he recently wrote on the grid, weather extremes and resilience from an equity perspective. So take a look at that for the resilience piece. We have a couple more questions in the Q&A, but I do want to leave some time for each of you to sort of give some final remarks if you'd like. So I'll just pick one of these two questions. This is a sort of a technical question. For phantom loads other than motion sensor lights and other efficiency, other than motion sensor lights, what other efficiency controls are available for electronics, especially for older populations with constant forgetfulness? You were talking about your mother, Will, and her refrigerator in the basement, but what other efficiency controls are there for electronics?
Yeah, so happy to jump in here on this one. Yeah, thanks for the question. So yeah, the idea of lights that are on a motion sensor, right? That is obviously one way where it's going to be automatically implemented. There are a number of other ways I think that you can leverage smart home technology for an elderly population, or really anyone who doesn't want to be playing that role of having manual intervention. So a lot of our messaging and education is really focused on how can you better leverage these devices to see that reduction in usage, but have the work done for you. So we use the term scenes for our specific platform and technology, but the idea could be, you have lights that are coming on and turning off at a certain time, right? And it's not based on motion, and it's not based on you remembering to go in and turn them off. It's happening every day at a certain time, right? So the same concept could be applied to a smart plug that an appliance is plugged into, right? So if you know that you don't need something running, after a certain time in the evening, it doesn't need to come back on until the morning, a smart plug can be used in the same way, setting that time-based schedule. Another thing is a power strip. So plugging TVs, monitors, those types of electronics into a power strip that again can be put on that time-based schedule, right? So we don't need our electronics running overnight when we're not using them. So I think those are just some examples of ways that technology can be used to reduce usage.
Terrific, thank you. Well, with that, I'm going to ask each of you, if you do not have to have closing remarks, but just to give some quick closing thoughts. Jacob, but we got to go really quickly because I see Kathy, the boss, and she has some words to share at the end here. So Jacob, why don't you go first?
Well, I would just like to say thank you for inviting OPC to be a part of this discussion. I've actually learned quite a bit from the comments from the other speakers. So it's always great to participate in these things because you tend to get viewpoints and you get information that you might not otherwise have learned. So thanks again.
Terrific. Arjun? Arjun, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, MCEC. It's been wonderful, great event as usual. I've been so happy to be part of your advisory council for so many years. And What I'd say is there's a kind of a junction between equity and efficiency that we need to be aware of. I mean, there is a public general interest in an equitable energy transition, truly, an economic interest. If you want real-time rates, if you want a functioning grid, if you want large parts of the emergency availability of essential businesses and gas stations, this needs to be throughout society. You know, we have 400,000 homes in Maryland eligible for energy assistance. By state criteria, it would be 50% more, or by federal criteria. So we're talking we're talking a third of Maryland homes here. We cannot achieve a good energy transition without the full participation, engagement of all sections of the population in terms of income. And I think it will benefit everybody economically. And that's sort of my short message for equity, is that non-low income people will benefit economically if this is done right, and if energy burdens are made low and kept low with good investments in efficiency. So thank you.
Thank you. Katie?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to MCEC. This was a great panel. Thank you for having me. I think I've learned so much from each of you that have been a part of this panel. It's really been inspiring to hear about the work that all of you are doing within your individual companies. So happy to have had the opportunity to share some of the work that I'm doing, and look forward to work that's going to continue to be done on such an important issue.
Great. And Will?
Hey, thank you. And likewise to Katie, thanks to such an esteemed panelist. I've enjoyed myself today. The only comment I would say in closing, I think, we just have an opportunity to really change the way we approach everything that we do. If we just take a look at it from a lens of equity, there's a way to just be more equitable in the solutions and the communities that we serve. At PEPCO, we truly believe that we're only as good as the communities that we serve. And if we can help our communities thrive, then it's going to put us in a much better place as a utility. And so thank you all for the conversation today, and happy to continue discussions offline.
Terrific. Well, thanks to all of you, and thanks from me also to Kathy and the team at MCEC. You've done a terrific job. And we'll turn it over to you.
Great job. You are the consummate professional moderator, and you had great people to work with on your program. I heard a lot of things today. Just in summary, leveraging public funds to attract more private investment is important in the equity space as well. That we need to up the outreach and education effort across the board, and not to just focus on low income or financial barriers, but to think about other barriers that communities face and meet the community where they are. Also important, I think, for us to understand is that if we're throwing energy assistance funds at helping low income ratepayers pay their bills, it's really important for equity to ensure that that energy is coming from a clean source, because that's part of the equity equation, is not just buying dirty energy. So again, great panel, great job, you all. We have another upcoming webinar. We're banging this through on October 5th. We'll be looking at building and bankrolling energy projects. And then quickly after that, federal and state investment and incentives. So this discussion can continue. We'll be talking about workforce readiness for the advanced energy economy on October 12th, and closing with innovation ahead, how we look at advanced energy and carbon emissions reduction. I'm really pleased to announce this morning that the Maryland Clean Energy Center has been awarded a $750,000 grant from the Economic Development Administration for its work in the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator. So that's great news for us. We look forward to having you all back in the coming weeks, and we'll close with great good morning. Bye-bye.